Hi, my name is Jim Baker, and as you see from the titles, this is a soap making video. There is an awful lot to know about making soap. There are a lot of procedures to go through, and those procedures increase if you're going to make it as a living. If you're going to sell it to people, there's a lot of legal loopholes that you'll need to jump through. The first of which is keeping good records. Now, it's my intention today to concentrate on the actual making of the soap. So if you're a hobby soap maker, you might find this video entertaining, because we're going to talk about the actual ingredients, the combination of the ingredients, and actually getting it into the mold ready to cure overnight. Other videos that I'm going to make will show more detail on things like the chemicals we use, how to weigh the ingredients out, how to get it curing, things like the paperwork. We'll go into details. Suffice to say, with the paperwork, it's always wise to have comprehensive notes about what you're doing. This book here records every single batch number, every single ingredient, and the exact weight that I'll be using in the soap mix. And this is just one of many records that I keep, because this is just about one particular soap. Today we're going to make a lavender and tea tree soap. It has a small coloured swirl in it, and I'll be showing you how to do that, or at least I'll be showing you how I do it, because there's more than one way. I have a separate paperwork here which is about the batch. Now, each time you make a soap, it must have a batch number which is recorded on the packaging that you use to sell. Of course, none of this is needed if you're just doing this as a hobby, but of course if you're selling it, you have to record absolutely everything you could do, and you can see I've been doing that for quite some time now. So this will include my recipe. It shows me everything I need to know, so I need to refer to that. I've already filled out the amounts, as you can see here. So I now need to construct my ingredients like every good cook does at the beginning of a cookery show. All of the ingredients are prepared, ready to go, and what we'll be doing is preparing those in that video. But at the point where you don't want to see me weighing out things, you know how to weigh things, I'm sure. We'll be fast forwarding the video at that point, so you don't have to wait too long. Okay, so the first thing to do is to say that my oils have already been mixed. If you know anything about soap making, you'll know it starts with a mixture of oils. My particular blend is 5 oils, and there they are. Now they've been made recently, so they're still fairly liquid, even though I've used some solid butters like cocoa butter and things like this. This batch is dated, and this corresponds to my notes here. When I first made this batch, I made 5,000 grams. These are the relevant batch numbers, and all of this information is stored, and you can see I've got the same date. The 3rd of the 10th, 16th is when I made that batch, and then I can record all of those numbers in the paperwork so I know I'm up to date. So the next thing to do is to give my mould some warmth. What I'm going to do is pour the soap batter into one of these wooden moulds. It's a very sturdy construction. You use it over and over again. It's got a lovely silicone mould in it, which makes it so easy to get the soap in and out. You get a little lid which you put on. Okay, and what I'm going to do is take this one here. This is the one that I've deliberately cleaned for the process. I'll put that one back. And I want to warm this. Now, the process of soap that we're making is known as a cold process, but it's not cold. It actually is quite warm. I'll be using my thermostat, my thermometer here, my electric laser thermometer, to assess what sort of temperature we're at, because I need the warmth to be about the same. I want my mould to be about the same warmth as my oils when it's all combined. So the first job for me to do is to go and put this in the oven, because it does need to be warm. So I'll be right back. That didn't take long, did it? No. So we have, in soap making, we have many dangerous chemicals, and the first of which I'd like to talk about is the lye mixture. It's actually a sodium hydroxide, and I store it under here, oh there we go, in a plastic tub, and you can see it's appropriately labelled. It will corrode your skin. Yep, sodium hydroxide. This is a pure form and it gets mixed with the water. Okay, it's what I think the correct pronunciation of this chemical is anhydrous. In other words, it will absorb moisture from the atmosphere, so you must keep it in a plastic tub with the lid on. Don't take the lid off until you're going to use it. So the first thing I need to do is weigh some water. I'm going to zero my scale, ensure we're at 0. I'm using, this is an old container, it's a distilled water. You can't use, well, you can use tap water, but you will find that the tap water has far too many contaminants in it. It's better to use a distilled water, and you will have a much better soap bar as a result. Yeah, now, luckily we didn't spill any because we've only got a small container. Okay, so I'll just put my water away. Now I've gone slightly over there and I don't want to pour it back in. The easiest way to take out water is a nice clean rag, and we just dip it in there until, yeah, that's about the right amount. You can see it's fractions. We're talking about drops here. This measure goes down to 0.00005 of a kilogram, so it's extremely accurate. So here we have, within a tolerance level that's perfectly acceptable, like I say, literally a drop or two, we have our water. And I have a separate plastic container now for the sodium hydroxide. I'm going to press 0 on that. Now, one of the first things to do when using the chemical is protect your eyes. And some of you might actually start screaming at the video in a moment saying that I should also be wearing gloves, but this chemical is only dangerous when it comes in contact with water. At the moment it's a powder, just like a salt or a washing powder, and you can actually have that on your skin. It's not too bad. Now if you have wet hands you would start to burn, it would give you a problem, but you would notice that quite quickly. You'd get yourself to a tap, wash it off, and it would be okay. So we're going to weigh out the correct amount. Now I should be referring to my recipe each time, but because I've done this quite a few times now, I remember the number, and we're looking for 144.3. Now this is where I have to measure exactly. I do not want absolutely anything over. So we've gone over there, and that's quite simply remedied, just a little bit out. We are talking fractional amounts now. 144.35. There we are, 144.3. So this must not be over at all. Now it's been calculated, it's been carefully checked, and it's been independently assessed that this amount of sodium hydroxide will cause my oils to turn into soap. But when I calculated that amount, I then reduced it by 5%. And the reason for that is that I want a trace element of my oils left in the soap, because the oils are obviously good quality oils. You want them on your skin, you want the benefits of those oils. So we have to turn this into a liquid, so without waiting too long, we'll go into here. Now just to demonstrate, we've got a room temperature water here, 18 degrees that's saying, and I'm going to go in with now I can take a visual check and I know I've got all the grains out of there. I'm quite happy with that. Now, as long as I don't stir, that's not going to become too volatile too quickly. But when we dissolve that powder in the water, a gas will be let off, and that is poisonous. Okay, so we've got an extractor fan in the room to make sure. Now, if I just measure that, the temperature of that, now we're already at 21. We've already got a few degrees. Now what I'm going to do is just gently agitate that so we get a better, faster level of mixing. And I can feel on the side we're already rising. We're at 72 now. 69, 70 degrees. And as I mix that more, that will actually start to create a steam vapor which will carry the chemicals with me. So, and now that's really hot. Now this plastic here is laboratory grade plastic. It can withstand strong acid, strong alkaline, so there's absolutely no problem there. The fumes are above head height now. They're rising out of the room and being sucked out by the extractor fan, so there's absolutely no danger to us. The glasses help with the splash, so there's no danger there. So the next step, whilst we're waiting for the temperature of that water just to drop a little bit, I want to keep it warm, but I don't want it as warm as it is now, which is about 80 degrees. So we're going to move on to now combining our essential oils. And as I said, this is a lavender and tea tree. Now I will have to go to my recipe here just to confirm that with the lavender, I want 23.5 grams. Now essential oils, you might think, oh wonderful essential oils, these are great smelling things, these are lovely things to use. But when you're talking about half a litre of lavender oil, the smell coming out of here is really quite strong. So again, something to avoid is putting your nose right over it. The liquid itself is also very strong, so you want to avoid getting it on your skin. But with lavender and tea tree, they're very kind oils. You can get them on your skin without anything else. Any other oils, you would want to now be wearing gloves. If you're using a cinnamon oil, for example, or say ylang ylang oil, it's wise to wear gloves. But with lavender and tea tree, you should be okay. Now you'll also become practiced about getting the oil from the container into the bottle. As you can see, I've put my bottle on, re-zeroed the scale. I'm using the same scale, so I know that the error factor is going to remain the same. Now it's quite a few of these. We may just speed through these until I get up to 23.5, although I'm already at about 10 grams there. Doesn't take long. $20. $23.5 we need, so there we go. Coming up to 23. 0.4. Now we're talking about drops there, literally drops, just to bring it up to that last. So having a good system, remembering to always put lids on. Spilling this stuff is not only expensive but could cause damage to your work surface, certainly your hands. If it goes into your clothing and is held against your skin, you'll want to change that straight away. Here we are with the tea tree, and I have my these pipettes have been used for nothing but tea tree. That's why I've labelled them. This last one here is for vitamin E. So you have a pot here, all different oils, and I use the same pipettes each and every time. So I re-zero my scales, check my recipe. I want 11.5 now. So same process. There we go. And from here on in, I will keep my glasses on, not only to help me see, but to protect my eyes. Okay. Okay, 11.35, so just a little bit more. I'm talking just a couple of drops. There we go. Just tap out the rest. The last ingredient to go in here is a vitamin E. It's a natural vitamin E from a vegetable source. Zero that and just check, we want 1.75 grams. It's held in a glycerin substance. Glycerin is naturally made in soap, so we're just adding a tiny fraction of glycerin, mostly vitamin E. And this is where pipettes like this become absolutely invaluable, because you can buy hundreds of them for pence, and as soon as you think they become contaminated anyway, you could just throw them in the bin. They can be recycled as well, obviously, because they're just simple plastic. So there we have our essential oils and our vitamin E, which we'll just gently combine. And the next step is our colour, and we can re-zero this pot, and using a nice clean stainless steel spoon, making sure we have the correct, this is an ultramarine violet, and we need 7007, which is what's prescribed in the recipe. These are natural earth pigments. They're created in a laboratory, so they're nice and clean and safe to use on skin, but they are naturally occurring within the earth, and we need 0.7, which is a tiny amount. 0.4, there's 0.6. I think that should 0.65, 0.7. Right. As you can see, it's an absolutely minuscule amount when you think that the oils that we're using are 1000 grams, and the addition of the sodium hydroxide mix we made is another 450 grams, I believe, something like that. So we can put that to the back. So that's now ready to go. That's in a separate pot to our oils, because I create a coloured swirl within the mould. I'll show you how that works, not only in the actual production, but later on we will be cutting some soaps and show you how that swirl works. So now we have weighed everything out. We have our essential oils ready to go, we have our colour ready to go. Push all these to the back, and I can now get rid of our scales. We can now take the lid off here, because that's obviously protecting. And I'm also going to get, no, I don't need, I was going to get another pot for my spoon. I don't need that. Now these are sort of close to room temperature. They've been made recently, so the temperature is slightly up on room temperature. That's 43, which is about the lowest that I want it to be. But of course, in a moment I'm going to add my sodium hydroxide solution, which is still a lot warmer even after this time. Now I know from experience that the fumes will have died down, and as you can see now, all the white powder is completely gone, which has got a clear water, but that is still really quite warm. We're at 72 degrees. That's fine. We just swirl that a little bit more, just to help it, encourage it come down a bit. 72. That's still quite hot, but that's fine. So now my mould is in the oven warming, as I say. The essential oils are ready to go in, so we can now start the process of mixing the two, and just gently pouring and stirring Now normally oil and water don't mix, but of course the sodium hydroxide in there is in effect emulsifying the oil and allowing the water to mix quite happily. And the fraction that we have left there is negligible. So just out of interest, we'll go and test the temperature again, and we're now at 55. That's the perfect temperature. What I don't want is my mould to be, I don't want my batter here, this mix, I don't want that to be colder than the mould that I'm going to pour it in, because as this cures it creates its own heat. The saponification process is exothermic and we want that heat, and we're actually going to insulate the whole mould while it cures overnight, and I'm going to show you my box in another video, show you my insulating box. But for now we're just gently stirring that, allowing the oil and the water to come together. We've got plenty of time. Now, so the next step. The next step is to actually start aggressively mixing, and this will speed up the saponification process and the batter will start to thicken. This will reduce the amount of time we have available to get it into the mould. So in with the mixer, it helps if you turn it on. In with the mixer, and you can see it's gone a little lighter now, but still quite liquid. Each time you do it, you'll see a slight colour change, very, very subtle. And again, still quite liquid. But the more that we do this, the thicker the mixture will become. Now what I'd like to do, actually I should have got my pot out because it will be easier. I'm going to get just a clean pot out. That means I can put my spoon down without making a mess. This is now probably the most dangerous state. We have warm oil that has the hydroxide, the sodium hydroxide in it. So it will take a lot longer to rinse. If this is spilt onto your skin, it will start to burn you, but of course because it's an oily mixture now, it will be harder to rinse. So you have to be much more careful with what you're doing. Now here's our coloured pot. We're only going to colour a proportion. It doesn't matter how much, we don't have to weigh. What we're just going to do is pour in about 1/3 of the mixture. And my mixer can go in there. And I'll just take my spoon and try and avoid too many spillages. I have a paper towel from earlier, just to try and keep it clean. Now I will get rid of that straight away into the bin. So the next process is to bring that colour in. Now the more I do this, the thicker this mix is going to get. It's going to start turning into soap, but the raw batter mix without any colour isn't. So this is where the clock starts ticking. And as you can see, I want to try and get some of the colour off, because I've now got to go into here. Now obviously there's colour on there, but it's such a trace amount, it's such a minute amount, you won't see Now we can see we're very nice and thick in there too. So we will put our mixer away, trying to keep things clean. And now we will just have the spoon. We're still quite liquid, but I know from experience that I've done enough mixing now to turn that into a certain, you can see already that's much thicker. That's really thickening up. Now if I need to, I can stir that and that will slow it down, but this is the one I want to thicken up now. I might need to go into it with the blender just once more. General rule with your hand blender is to do what you think is not enough mixing. You can always do a little bit more. If you do too much, your soap could suddenly start to thicken and you don't get any time to get it into the mould. Now I'm going to just fetch myself another spoon briefly, because this is now starting to thicken up and we need to stir it. Now you can see that's a lot thicker and it's leaving a mark on the surface there. I don't know if you can see that, but that mark is a way of telling how thick your soap is and whether the actual saponification process has started. And I can tell that that is now starting to trace, and that's what we want, because we know that the chemical reaction has started. And that chemical reaction is what's going to make the soap. If you don't mix enough, it doesn't start properly. And you don't get a good cure, you don't get a nice hard bar of soap. And you can see if I stir it, it actually slows the process down a little bit. It's now not tracing as much. So we know we have a little bit of time. We can go back to this one. This is still quite nice and liquid, but it's just at the early stages. If I was to leave this and not touch it at all, it would start to thicken up. As you can see, we go back to this one, that's now thickened again. So the consistency of those now tell me I should go and get my mould. I'm going to just wipe my hands off. And I have splashed, not splashed, I have got tiny amounts on my fingers, but it's not affecting. It's a very mild sensation, so it's fine. So it's now time to go and get the mould out of the oven. I'll be back soon. So here we are. Now, it's not so hot that I can't touch it obviously, but it is now very, very warm. The centre of that silicone, we're at 46, that's perfect. Because I know we're around 50 degrees here, hopefully 47. So we're about the same temperature. I certainly don't want my mould to be colder because it will sap the heat out of the mix. And what I want is the heat to build. So I don't want this mould to cause me a problem. Now that's a very light trace there, but it's a beautiful silk mixture. The creaminess of that is just going to improve. And we'll have a look at the coloured one. That's a lot thicker as well now. And you can see it's now tracing on the top there. The mixture is sort of settling on the top, so we know that that's slowly now saponifying, turning into soap. And what I can't do now is just leave it, walk away thinking I've got ages. I haven't. Now the mix I use is called an in the pot swirl mix. You've probably found this on YouTube several times. I've tried several different mixes. I've tried dividing the batch in half and colouring half the batch and trying to do it exact, but it doesn't need that. The last thing we have to do though before we do that colour swirl method is add our essential oils. Now the swirl method does reincorporate all of these, so what we can do is go in with our essential oils here. We can put them all in this pot, and then the process of adding the soap to the mould will mean that all of the soap mixture gets its essential oils. Now we leave the essential oils going in. We want to put those in as late as possible, because the heat, the warmth of the liquid will start the evaporation process. You may well lose some of your essential oils literally just to evaporation. Try and get every last drop out you can, because essential oils is what it's all about. That's what makes your soap so gorgeous to use. And because they're lovely thin and watery, once they hit that warm liquid they mix in really easily. You haven't got to blend it, although you could go in. That's still quite liquidy. In fact, I think I will. We've still got time on that one, that's okay. I will just give that and that's the last thing that it will need. That's the last bit of mixing. I haven't done that because of the essential oils, it's not necessary. I just want to bring that up a bit thicker, because the in the pot swirl method you'll see you don't want it too liquid, because you want them to hold the colours. So here we go. What we do, we're going to divide this mix in half roughly. We're going to put a blob in there like that, one half, and then we're going to go for a second blob there. Now if you pour it hard it will sink to the bottom. If you pour it gently it will stay on the top. So let's get rid of all of that mixture now. So now our coloured proportion is back in there. Now what I'm going to do is get these tubs. You have to stir them at a particular, pour them rather at a particular point. So now we've got these two blobs, and because of the thick nature of the liquid, they're held as blobs within the mix. And the very act of pouring will swirl them. But what I do is I just do one turn with the spoon, as you can see, and that just sort of semi-swirls the blobs. And then as we go into the soap mould, you can see it's lovely and thick now. And the very act of pouring it just means that those two colours swirl together. And now it's a case of just trying to get the remaining batter out, because of all this is lovely soap mix which we want to get in. And with experience you'll know when you're starting to go to saponify, you'll see the process happening and you'll be able to pour it in as I have when it's quite liquid, and that gives you time. You haven't got to worry about it over thickening and not being able to get it out of your pot. It's still quite sort of custardy, if you like, or sort of double cream consistency. And it means you're not left with loads of soap in the pot, which is now useless. So we just clean up the edge there, because we're going to put a lid on there. We don't want it getting all messy. And the last job is just to, you don't want air bubbles in there, and you want it level as well, because it's a nice thick gooey liquid. And within half an hour that will be solid. It won't be brick-like solid. It will be more, what will it be, like a putty. So we have to be careful with it in the short term. But this is now going off to be cured for minimum of 24 hours. It's going to sit there probably for 36 with a lid on, keeping the heat in as much as possible. This is a non-stick lid here, so that any soap and that is easily clean off. There we go. So it now goes into my little homemade insulating box, which I have ready on the floor out here. Being careful just to keep it level. There we go. Now it's got a lovely insulating blanket inside. We cover it there. And I have some extra blankets. These are, you probably recognise them, removal blankets. Any old blanket will do, any old jumpers. There we go there. And we close up. Now that will stay like that, as I say, for 36 hours. At some point what I'm going to do is actually take it into another room in my house where the gas boiler is, and it's a very warm room, but I can't do that straight away because it's still liquid. I don't want to upset the level, but in about half an hour, the soap batter will solidify enough for me to move that around, no problem. But for now, that's it. That's us. We've made our soap. The remaining job is to clear up, and I'm sure you know how to use hot water, hot soapy water, to clear up. Although I will make one comment about clearing up. What you've got here in these pots is still a liquid oil and sodium hydroxide mix. This on the skin will cause burns. And if you also try and clean it up now, you are trying to clean up a thick oily goo, and you're going to need extremely hot water to flush that away down your sink. The best thing to do is actually use paper towels, but that can be expensive, especially if you're manufacturing frequently. But what I do is I use these old rags, which you can buy very cheaply on the internet. They're designed to be used by car repair workshops. They're just rags of cloth, and you can quite simply use the cloth, clean off your soap batter. You've now cleaned off 98–99% of the oily residue into the cloth, and that's now a lot easier to wash. On your cloth you've got the soapy batter, but of course if you leave this for 2 or 3 days, that will become soap. It will cure within the cloth and become soap. And of course soap naturally rinses away in just plain water. So I collect up a whole bundle of them. As you can see here, I've got a bundle to go. I'll put them in the washing machine, and then I'll have those cloths. It's a really great ecological way to clean up your soap batter. You get the cloth back, you can use it again. It's much cheaper for you if you're producing lots of soap. So I hope you've enjoyed what we've done today. And we are going to go back and make some more videos with more detail, perhaps about the sodium hydroxide, my curing box that you saw. I'll be showing you that, and certainly about the paperwork. We'll be going into more detail about that, because if you wish to manufacture soap, then you will perhaps hopefully benefit from that information. Also, there's very little videos on YouTube about soap making. Most of them are American, very few of them are English. So if you've enjoyed this and you want to give me a thumbs up, that's brilliant. And what about some comments in the boxes below? That would be brilliant as well. Tell me what you think. Don't be rude or criticise too heavily, and I will try and reply to you. So thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy the other videos and subscribe to my channel. Thank you. Bye bye.